What about diversity on stage in Ireland? What are initiatives against gender inequality in music in Ireland? And at least I'm going to talk in this episode with Riona about examples of great jazz musicians from Ireland.
Bebop-Mädchen, der Podcast, der MusikerInnen bewegt. Mit Themen rund um die Karriere und allem, was dazugehört. Gewürzt mit einer Prise Feminismus.
Hello, welcome to a new podcast episode from Bebop-Mädchen. Today I have again Riona with me because we are going to talk about gender in Ireland. And just want to ask you if there are some things that Ireland or like some communities do against the gender problem or the difference between men and women at the festivals. Are there some things that are going to happen?
There's been a few kind of initiatives. The Improvised Music Company, which is the national jazz promoter in Ireland, and full disclosure, I'm on the board of directors there. So it's just I happen to be biased in that, like, I know more of what they're doing. There might be some other initiatives that other organisations are doing that I just don't know about, but I just happen to know more about the Improvised Music Company because I'm on the board of directors. They have a programme called Ban Bam, which is all about gender equality in the Irish jazz scene. They started that a few years ago by having a festival that was all female-led bands, and I co-produced the festival with them. And then the following year, or maybe it was 2 years later, I'm not sure, they commissioned compositions from women. There's a call out to submit, and it was judged, and they chose, I'm not sure how many applicants. They commissioned some compositions, and then the following year they filmed. It was during the pandemic, so they couldn't perform them live, but they filmed them, the performances of those compositions, and they're putting them out. And I think that's going to be an ongoing thing. There's going to be various gigs or commissions, bursaries or grants. I'm not really sure. They don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it's a strand of their work called Ban Bam that's always going to promote gender equality in jazz, which I think is great. There's also a few organisations, not specifically in jazz. There's a very interesting group called Why Not Her, who are researching the gender balance of radio plays in like commercial radio stations in Ireland. We're not talking jazz, we're talking about like daytime radio, national stations. So it's mostly pop and hip hop, that kind of thing. And even there, the gender balance, like a stat I read the other day was that Today FM, which is one of the big national stations here, in the month of January this year, their top 20 most played songs, none of them were women or people of colour. It was entirely 100% white men. You know, those kinds of organisations are doing great work, and they're also campaigning for better gender diversity in mainstream radio, and they're doing amazing work. Those are two of the initiatives that I know of that I think are doing good things.
Do you know how the reactions are to that kind of stuff? Like under the musicians and under the people who go to concerts and festivals in Ireland?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of backlash. I know Ban
Okay.
Bam. So Ban Bam, the festival that I co-produced, it was a few years ago, but it was interesting just anecdotally hearing from my peers, from other musicians, people's opinions about it. A lot of people were just telling me, this is ridiculous, we don't need this.
Really?
And those same people now, it's a few years later, are starting to come around, some of them, and say like, oh, actually, turns out I've spoken to more women about it, and maybe you have a point, you know. So I do think that conversation is changing. I felt at the time, maybe I was a bit sensitive because I was co-producing it, so I felt very invested in the project. I felt like a lot of male musicians were not very receptive to it.
When there are more women in music and in jazz, maybe the men are scared that we are going to steal them their jobs.
Steal their gigs. I know, it's such a crazy kind of competitiveness. Ban Ban Festival, we were adamant that the lineup was entirely female-led bands. So every band was led by a woman or co-led by a man and a woman.
Cool.
But that didn't mean all the musicians were women. So it turns out even at that female-led festival, it was still 60% male performers on stage. So men were still the majority. And so sometimes when male musicians gave out saying like, it's crazy to have a woman-led festival, a female-led festival, like 100%, it should be 50-50, everything should be 50-50. I always said that would be great, because even at the female-led festival, it was still majority men. You know, that's how difficult it is to get a 50-50 balance, that even when we went out of our way, that still happened. And that was because we didn't want to dictate to people who was in their band. So if a band leader female band leader got on the lineup, we didn't want to say to her, you know, you have to play with a female drummer or something, if she'd always played with this male drummer. I know that why not her? I know that group isn't specifically jazz. Again, that's the mainstream radio research. They got a lot of backlash. Linda Coogan-Byrne is the researcher, and she just keeps on replying with facts every time she gets backlash. She just keeps on going with the stats of like, this is the reality of the situation. It's 100% men on Today FM, you know.
It is sometimes not so easy to choose a good reaction when you get like hate or something like that. I also recognize that when I publish like podcast episodes and put them in Facebook groups to make a little bit of advertising, and it's like the theme or topic is like about feminism. There are a lot of male musicians who are like, oh, that's not true, or you should take... I get one comment like, he's writing like, did you take your pills today? And I was like, come on, what the hell, what is that? And I didn't respond to them. I write to the person who leads the group, the Facebook group, and write like, come on, I didn't do something wrong. I only speak about a topic that exists. And I don't do some hate. I don't do some hate against them. Why it is possible that they do so much hate against me, and also like hate that is like in person. I think if I'm like, maybe if I would look like maybe like thick and ugly, then the people will say like, oh, you're only an ugly woman and therefore you're posting that. But I think because they couldn't complain on this and they couldn't complain on what I do on the guitar, they are like, okay, we have to find something else. And this is so ridiculous because you feel like, okay, come on, guys, what the hell? And it's only guys. And sometimes there are also guys who are saying like, what the hell those guys are doing because like this topic exists, and then they get also sometimes hate. And I'm like, come on, what the hell? I only talk about a topic. It's a podcast. You didn't have to listen to it. You can see the post in the group and let it there and think like, this is shit. I also don't like every post in every group, but I don't do like hate speech on posts like normally.
Yeah, I think lately when people are kind of hating on feminism and that kind of trolling, I just feel embarrassed for them. You know, I used to get defensive, I used to get angry about it and stuff. But now it feels like they're such dinosaurs. You know, I do feel like the jazz community is really far behind a lot of the rest of the world. Like the rest of the world is really catching up with a lot of the feminist ideas. Some of the guys in the jazz community say things to me as if they've just thought of it, about like girl boss, you know, like this feminist idea about like girl boss, you just have to work hard and then you can, like, that's what you should aspire to as a woman, is to work really hard, be a girl boss, and that was feminism. And you know, that's an outdated idea now it's about well, actually there are systems in place that hold women back. It's not about individual people just working twice as hard as everyone else, you know. But guys say that stuff as if they've just thought of it, as if it's a new idea. I feel like a lot of those trolls who come back with them, no, I don't want to put people in the same category as trolls. Sorry, there's uninformed people who just haven't made any effort to actually research the topic at all and are saying uninformed things as if they're batting down your argument, you know, as if they're geniuses. And you're like, well, I don't have the time to debate and argue with every single person unless you're going to go make an effort to inform yourself, or unless you're coming from a good place and you really want to learn, you know. And then on the other side, there's just trolls who say ridiculous things like, have you taken your pills? Or like, you're ugly. And those people, they're just trying to distract you. You know, I'm kind of embarrassed for them. And when I see it, I think they're just trying to distract me from doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
They're, I think, also trying to stop you, because I think like in one Facebook group, I recognize that it's a really big group with really much musicians in it. And it's like they are doing like hate speech every time when I release like episode, even if the episode is about like doing good booking. So it didn't have anything to do with feminism. And like, I think they tried to make me stopping posting in the group, but that's not what I'm going to do. I only ignore like comments, because I think like, okay, come on, they are not informed, but it's okay. If they don't want to inform themselves, it's their choice. But for me, it didn't make anything with me, and I post again. So they can't destroy me in that way.
Yeah. I think also it comes from a real place of insecurity. I know myself, I know this is a different topic, but it's how I relate to it kind of is I'm vegetarian, and I didn't used to be vegetarian. And I know in the past when I wasn't, I didn't like the idea of eating animals. I didn't think it was right. I don't care what anyone else does, but just for myself. But I didn't want to do anything about it, you know. I didn't think it was right to eat animals, but I still was, because, you know, I just hadn't taken the steps. I didn't want to stop eating burgers because they're delicious, let's be honest, you know. So when other people would say that they're vegetarian, I would like slag them, I'd tease them, or I'd like make stupid arguments, or I'd talk about like, oh, that's, you know, that's stupid, burgers are just delicious, why, you know. I'd say things that now in retrospect were probably really annoying for the vegetarian, you know, and it was coming from a place of insecurity, because deep down I really didn't think what I was doing was right, you know. And I think, yeah, there's probably a bit of that when it comes to feminism, and that people feel complicit when it comes to feminism, because if, as a male musician, you're probably benefiting from the fact that male musicians are much better represented, much better supported than women musicians. And then also, we're all complicit. That's the thing. We live in a society that is inherently misogynistic in some ways. And so in lots of ways, even as women performers, we have in various ways been complicit. Like, I'm sure early on in my career, I had a bit of that attitude of like, oh, I'm not like other girls, you know. Not in my career, actually, that's a bit of a lie. Maybe in my teens when I was in school, not about music, but about other things, you know. If people, you know, complimented my musical knowledge or something, and said I wasn't like other girls because I was into jazz or something, I would take that as a compliment, instead of now being like, that's, you know, a misogynistic statement, women like jazz, you know. So in that way, I'm complicit, you know what I mean? I think everyone is complicit in some way in misogynism because of the society we live in, and so it makes people defensive if you bring it up.
I also think it's not only like the factors that you mentioned why for men it's easier to be a musician. It's also a point of feeling like safe and a little bit better than women, because when you're like the alien and you're always thinking about how should I behave or what should I wear that they are going to respect me, then it's sometimes a really hard thing, because you have so much overthinking in your head only to don't be like the stereotype of a woman in music or a woman in jazz, that you think so much of your image and stuff like that, that also sometimes it stops you from ideas. Because I, for example, I like also to sometimes wear like clothes on stage that are a little bit sexy, and then I think like when I'm going to into feminism, I was like, could I wear this? Because then they think like, that's is a woman who sell like her body or something like that to earn more respect or something like that. So it's really hard with the overthinking point, I think.
Yeah, I remember I made a real point when I studied jazz, you know, at the end of the degree, you have a performance, you know, your exam performance. And I made a point that probably no one else cared or noticed or was thinking about, but I was thinking about that. I was thinking about like, oh, how do I dress? Because all the guys are dressing really casual in like jeans and t-shirts, but some of the girls get really dressed. And, you know, I was thinking about that, and I was like, I shouldn't have to pretend to be masculine to be accepted. And I wore like loads of flowers in the end I wore loads of flowers in my hair and stuff, and it was partly for myself, telling myself like, I don't have to deny that side of myself to be taken seriously. I shouldn't have to, you know. And there is a real double standard there when it comes to presentation, because I don't know what the scene is like in Germany, but in Ireland there has been a real scene of like dressing really casual. Jazz musicians, they wear like t-shirts and jeans and beanie hats, you know. Even if they're playing like the National Concert Hall or something, they'll still show up in like wrinkled t-shirts and jeans. It's just the culture. I remember like my final performances in college, all the guys were in jazz and in t-shirts and jeans and all the rest. And some of the guys gave out about one of the women who was playing in his band because she showed up in shorts and flip-flops. And I was like, she was an incredible singer. I was like, if you're going to ask her to be in your band, just respect her musicianship. Or did you or asking him like, did you give everyone a dress code? Because that's a fair enough thing to do. Or did you complain about any of the guys how they showed up? Or I remember one of the musicians, his mum was in the audience and said like, oh, isn't it a pity that one of the female musicians who was playing, isn't it a pity that she didn't brush her hair? And I was like, I went to college with 30 guys. I don't think any single one of them brushed their hair once in the entire 4 years I was in college with them, you know. And none of that was commented on, even to the point like then when I was performing professionally, a lot of the like you know, like cocktail bar gigs and restaurant gigs, those kinds of ones, there was this, it's an assumption, it's a given that the woman, the singer, will show up really dolled up, you know, full face of makeup, nice hair, nice dress, probably wearing heels, you know. That's the look that they want. The guys can get away with a shirt and a pair of black trousers or something. But that takes a lot of effort and energy. I mean, if that's your everyday style anyway and you're used to it, then brilliant. And maybe it's not more effort for you to show up with done hair. But like, that's not my everyday style. I'm not someone who wears a lot of makeup day to day. So that was an extra. I felt like, oh, that's an extra hour's work for every gig. I'm not getting paid an extra hours worth of work to do my hair and makeup. Maybe if I had more experience doing hair and makeup, I could do it faster. You know, back in the days when I did more cocktail gigs, cocktail bar kind of gigs, I did get faster at that.
But it's not only the point about the time that you need. It's only a thing about you need like the makeup stuff. You have to buy it. And also like with the dresses and with the clothes, it's also not that cheap if you need like some dresses that you are only wearing on stage. And you only have to wear them because you're a woman, and the guy could come in jeans and with maybe some nice shirt or something like that, and that's it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And they're hard to maintain, those kind of dresses. They're not like shirts that you can throw in the washing machine or something. That's what I always found irritating. Anyway, maybe that's my own little bugbear. But yeah.
What do you think does it need? Because you're saying like you want to be more solution orientated. What does it need to change?
I know I'm going to get some pushback on this, and I know not everyone's going to agree with me. And I should preface it by saying this isn't the opinion of the Gender Balance in Irish Jazz group that I've set up. We haven't made any qualitative statements, any like comments on what should be done, or have made any suggestions. That's not what we're doing yet. We're just researching. So this is purely my own opinion. But I think jazz festivals should just book more women. I think it's that simple. I don't think they should worry about like, I think some of them are saying like, oh, but what is the overall gender balance in the jazz scene? If we book more women, you know, we should just represent that. So if there's only, I don't know what the number is because it's impossible to measure, but let's say there was only 15-20% of the jazz musicians in Ireland were women, then jazz festivals say like, oh, well, we're happy to maintain that status quo. We'll try and book 15-20%. I think jazz festivals should just say, no, we want to be change makers. We want to improve the situation. We're not happy to just go along with status quo. We want to help make it better and just put more women on stage. I think it's that simple. Put more women on stage. Then think about how they are talking about and promoting those women. Sometimes I see festivals in their promotion materials, there's like, you know, the women are promoted as the divas, the sexy sirens or something. You know, think about how they're doing that and think about their female audiences. I remember I was at Jazz Ahead. So every year there's a jazz industry conference in Bremen. There was these two incredible women performers and they kept being described as divas. And it was driving me mad. They were incredibly accomplished instrumentalists. And I was like, why are they being promoted as... That was like their own promotion materials, I'm not talking about other people who are calling them divas. Their own promotional materials are calling them the jazz divas. And I think that puts off female audiences. I'm sure it appeals. There is a big audience of men that it appeals to, but it puts off women audiences. And jazz promoters are begging for bigger audiences. I don't know what it's like in Germany or in other countries, but in Ireland, it's a really niche music. They need all the audience they can get. So the idea of doing something that alienates 50% of the population is crazy, you know? As a woman, even if I was thinking about a music that I'm not familiar with and I was looking at a festival lineup and I saw some band being promoted as divas, something, I would immediately assume that gig was not for me, that is not being sold, it's not being marketed to me. I wouldn't go to it.
Yeah, that's a pity how also they write about like women and female musicians and like the newspapers and stuff like that. In Germany, you see like there's a difference. I don't know how it is in Ireland, but you see like when you're, for example, a female musician on stage, they also sometimes talk about how you look, what you wear, and what kind of behavior you have. And sometimes they don't talk that much about the music.
Yeah. Or I've noticed, this is a tough one because I can see both sides, but if there's a woman fronting a band and the band are men, sometimes reviewers will focus on how great the band are, what great musicians they are, and won't mention anything about the woman's compositions or her performance. You know, they'll say like the band by such and such, and they'll go into detail about the men in the bands, their musicianship. And I guess that's a tricky one, because on the one hand, they are great musicians. I don't want to take away from that. But I know if my gig was being reviewed, I would want all the male musicians that I play with to be acknowledged and recognised, and their skill and talent to be recognised, absolutely. But I would also want there to be a comment on, you know, the songs I'd written, or my performance, or the arrangements that I'd made, or something like that. Even if they're bad comments, but just acknowledge them, that, you know, that I had some agency in the music that was made. It wasn't just a question of what men I was playing with, you know.
We are talk a lot about Irish jazz. Do you have some female jazz musicians or like bands or leaders in mind that you can recommend?
Oh, absolutely. 1 second. I have a list. I'm just going to pull it up.
Great.
So that I don't forget someone, because I'm sure I'm going to forget someone. First off, Izumi Kimura is an absolute world-renowned piano player, improvising musician. And we're so lucky to have her in Ireland. You can look up her work. It's incredible. It's beautiful. Jenna Harris is about to release some new music called Shadow Cree. I'm really looking forward to hearing that. Aleko Patinga has released an EP. I don't think it's an album. I think it's an EP. Of beautiful music. She's Romanian, based in Ireland, and also sings a lot of Brazilian inspired music. Jennifer McMahon. Oh, you know who you should look up is, there is an Instagram account called Irish Women in Jazz. This is much better. Now I don't have to feel bad about forgetting someone, because you'll get all your information here. So Irish Women in Jazz is a new Instagram account set up by Jennifer McMahon, who's a musician herself. She's a singer and a guitar player, amongst other instruments. And she highlights women working in the jazz scene in Ireland. So she'll take various people and she'll write a bio on them. She'll share playlists they've made. She'll link to all of their websites and social media and all of that, so you can find them more about them. So that's definitely worth checking out. It's called Irish Women in Jazz.
Okay, I will link the channel in this show notes, so if anyone is interested, you can have a look. And also I will link like your website and like your Instagram channel about the gender balance in Irish jazz.
Brilliant. Oh, 2 more names. I'm gonna annoy you now. I'm gonna keep thinking of people. I think one of the things in Ireland is that there's so much emigration. Obviously, I mean, everywhere, especially musicians. It's very difficult to make a living in jazz in Ireland, so a lot of people emigrate. Not to say that that's the only reason people emigrate. There's lots of reasons. So there's a lot of Irish musicians living abroad, but they're still Irish and they're still incredible musicians, so I want to shout out them as well. So like, for example, Bonnie Stewart is a jazz drummer, but also a singer and a songwriter and a guitar player, and she's based in Australia now. I absolutely love her music, Bonnie's songs. Ruba Shamshoom is a Palestinian singer, and also Irish and Palestinian, and she's based in the UK now, but I love her music as well. And then Lauren Kinsella is a singer, also based in London, but originally from Ireland. Lauren Kinsella has the band Snow Poet. Their most recent album is absolutely beautiful. It's well worth checking out. Anyone who's interested in kind of studio techniques used in a almost collage-like way. Anyway, yeah.
Nice. Thanks for your recommendations. Do you have anything in mind that we have forgotten in this episode to say, or something you want to say to the listeners?
The one thing I would say is, it's easy when we're having these conversations. Obviously, we're pointing out problems, you know, gender inequality, problems of gender inequality, and just if there are any women musicians listening who feel like it's very heavy and need some positivity after all that, because we have this shared experience of being underrepresented in the culture, we are very supportive of each other. I have found amazing support from other women musicians, I should say other feminist musicians, whether they be men or women. I've as much as there is trolling and there is ignorance and stuff and misogyny, there is also incredible feminist musicians, men and women, in the Irish jazz scene and abroad, who I love playing with. And I do think things can and will change for the better.
That are nice words, like, because sometimes you think you're going to lose the fight because there's like so many men against, you're like fighting, not really fighting, but sometimes it feels like that. And sometimes you have like moments, I can only talk about myself, but sometimes I have like moments where I feel like an alien or like a sex object or something like that, and that sometimes throws you really hard to the ground. And then it's really good to have like in mind that there are going to be some changes. There are some changes there right now. And I think we are going to change the whole thing. I hope that we are going to do it.
Yeah, I do. I feel like there's change in the air.
Yeah. Thanks that you have been here, and thanks for all your input and all your inspiration.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great talking.
Cool. Nice. Nice. And all you out there, I hope you learned a little bit with this episode and you can take a little bit out of this episode, and see you in 2 weeks.